I thought maybe that Anthony Santander's walk-off home run on Thursday would pull the Orioles season back in the right direction. Well, it did so a little bit, maybe not as much as we wanted. The O's still lost the series this weekend to the Tigers. But even with that, they have inched even closer to a playoff berth. I'll recap this weekend's series against Detroit coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Orioles fans. Today is Monday, September 23rd, 2024, and welcome back into the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb. And coming up on today's episode, we are going to recap the Orioles series loss to the Detroit Tigers this weekend as they dropped 2 out of 3 once again for the second weekend in a row against the hottest team in baseball. O's with a very complete performance coming off the Thursday walk-off, winning it 7-1 on Friday, but they came back, just not all the way back, losing 6-4 in 10 innings on Saturday, and then couldn't quite get it done in a 4-3 loss on Sunday as the Tigers took the series. I'll give you what went right, what went wrong, and a shout out to a player or a team for all 3 games this weekend. We'll chat about Corbin Burnes being fully back. We'll chat about a new home run issue for Albert Suarez. We'll talk about the O's finding the long ball once again, and Jordan Westburg, Ramon Arias, and Danny Coulombe all returning as the Orioles get a whole lot healthier. But that's all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast, which is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.com. Booking.yeah. The right stay can make you a fan of any city, even your baseball rivals. Book today on Booking.com, the official accommodation partner of Major League Baseball, and get the Booking.com app today. So we're recapping an O's series loss to the Tigers. I'm recording. It's just shy of 5 p.m. Eastern here on Sunday, so I'm certainly doing some scoreboard watching as well throughout the day as the Orioles' magic number, well, they cannot clinch. They did not win, so they cannot clinch until at least Tuesday. But if my math is right, I believe the Orioles' magic number can even drop to 1, depending on some results today. We'll get into that a little bit later and more specifically on Tuesday's episode. But let's recap this series. And as you know, I was in Maine this weekend. Wonderful family wedding. It was an amazing time. Didn't, because of that, have a chance to recap the awesome win on Thursday. Anthony Santander's walk-off home run as the O's avoided the sweep against the Giants. And then I thought, hey, this might really spark them. And it kind of started to, because it was a fairly complete performance. Orioles 7, Tigers 1 was the final score in Game 1 on Friday. Let's start with what went right in that one. And that was, well, the Orioles found the long ball once again. 5 home runs in that game for the O's. The first time they have hit 5 homers in a game all season, which is pretty surprising for a team that's been basically, if not the best, one of the best home run hitting teams in all of baseball all season long. Kind of surprising that they hadn't hit 5 in a game. Now, they have 8 4-home run games on the season, but the last time they did that was July 19th in Texas against the Rangers. That was the first series after the All-Star break. And the last time they had done it prior to that was June 27th at home against Texas. So they'd only hit 4 homers one time in the second half. They did it 7 times in the first half of the season. And they have a good chunk of 3-homer games as a team this year as well. But they had not even had a game with 3 or more home runs since August 7th in Toronto against the Blue Jays. It had been a month and a half since they even hit 3 homers in a game. So to hit 5 felt a lot more like those early season power surging Orioles. Anthony Santander got it started. 2-run homer from the right side in the first. His very next at bat after the walk-off homer was number 43 on the season off Tyler Holton, who's been amazing the last 2 years, to give the O's a 2-0 lead. Then Colton Cowser, he had 2 solo shots in this game, and that was his first 2 home runs in the month of September. He hadn't homered since August 29th at Dodger Stadium, and it's only his second 2-run homer game of the year. Only second 2-homer game of the year. And the other one was when he hit his first 2 MLB homers. Remember that crazy extra inning game, April 11th at Fenway Park, when Cowser hit 2 bombs to help the Orioles win that one? Well, he hit 2 more on Friday. And then really the most surprising part of this whole thing was James McCann. Adley was DHing, so McCann was catching on Friday night. How about a 2-homer game from James McCann? He got a 2-run shot to make it 5-0. Hit himself a solo shot later in the game to make it 7-0. His first 2-homer game of the season, and only the second time in an Oriole uniform in his 2 years. He's had a multi-homer game. Also did it September 9th of last year at home against the Red Sox. But when you're getting 2 homers from James McCann, you're probably feeling pretty good as an offense. Also, his 2-run shot in the 4th inning off of Cater Montero, which went 420 feet, that was his longest home run hit as an Oriole that was not hit at Coors Field. He hit one 429 feet at Coors Field earlier this year, but Coors gives you a little bit of a boost. So in non-Coors environments, it's the longest ball McCann has hit with the O's. And really, I mean, 4 of those 5 homers came off Cater Montero, who, remember, he started against the O's in Detroit last Sunday, just dominated them through 5 scoreless. The fact that they turned things around, faced the same pitcher again 5 days later, and got 5 runs off 7 hits against him in 4 2/3 innings, including the 4 long balls, tells me this team made some adjustments in that week, and that is a huge positive sign moving forward for these guys. Now, what went wrong on Friday? Well, it was the Tigers and their second attempt to hit Corbin Burnes, because the first time did not go well. Last Saturday in Detroit, Burnes went 7 scoreless, 2 hits, 7 Ks, and a walk against this Detroit offense. And Burnes saw him again on Friday night, and he basically did the exact same thing to the Tigers. 7 scoreless innings for Corbin Burnes on 3 hits, 8 Ks, 3 walks on 91 pitches for the Orioles righty, who has now gotten his ERA back under 3 to 2.95 on the season. And what a turnaround it has been. After Burnes had a 7.36 ERA in 5 starts in the month of August, one of the worst calendar months of his big league career, he's turned it around and now has a 1.08 ERA in his 4 starts in September. I told you throughout Burnes's tough streak in August, if there's going to be anybody I trust to figure it out, it's going to be Corbin Burnes, and how good of a pitcher, a former Cy Young winner that he is. And he certainly figured it out. Now, the question is, what has he been doing? Well, the one thing we've talked about throughout this is he's found a better command of his changeup and his slider, 2 nasty pitches that have a lot of great movement. They're super deceptive, but he just couldn't throw them for a strike throughout August. And hitters would identify them and just know, I don't have to swing here because it's going to be a ball. And that basically made him a 2-pitch pitcher with the cutter and the curveball. And guys could sit on that. And as good as Burnes is, if you can sit on 2 pitches, you're eventually going to get to him. And that is what happened. Now, on the flip side of all this, it's still not perfect command, but he's throwing them at least a little bit for strikes. They're closer to the strike zone, that changeup and slider, still with elite movement, and maybe even more movement because he's taken a little bit off of his pitches. If you look at his last few starts, the velocities have been down across the board for every pitch he's throwing, including he's throwing more of that sweeping slider that really helped him in the second half last year with Milwaukee that he hadn't thrown up until September of this year with the O's. It's moving more. It's a little slower. That is certainly helping. And it seems like this was a on-purpose thing by Burnes to take a little bit off. It's helped with the movement and the command of all of his pitches and has just made him really, really good once again. And you love a guy who is willing to make those adjustments this late in the season and to see them come through. He has found this happy medium combined with, I mean, he had old school Corbin Burnes, pristine cutter command with his number 1 pitch on Friday night. That all came together for just a fantastic start, mowing down the Tigers lineup once again. And again, it is possible that the O's and Tigers meet in the wild card round. That would be a heck of a series. A lot of Jim Palmer talked about it a lot on Sunday's broadcast, how much data these teams would have on each other after playing 6 times in the final 3 weeks of the season. But I can tell you right now, the Tigers hitters do not want to see Corbin Burnes a 3rd time, and that's probably who they'd see in game 1 of a wild card series. And the shout out, well, the shout out for Friday goes to Danny Coulombe, who was activated off the injured list on Friday. Birch Smith went on the IL with a right groin strain that opened up the spot for Coulombe. Smith was probably going to be the move anyway. He had options and was most likely going to go to AAA, but apparently something was bothering him. He hadn't been great lately, so he goes on the IL. Most likely his season with the O's is done. We'll kind of check back in on Birch Smith this offseason to see if he's someone the Orioles want to keep around for 2025. But Coulombe has been out for a while. He went on the injured list June 11th, and he last pitched on June 8th with elbow inflammation. They found some bone chips in his elbow. He had surgery to get those removed. He rehabbed, and he made it back before the end of the regular season, which was huge. Now, he wasn't his sharpest. He allowed 2 hits. He allowed 3 hard hit balls, but he struck out 2 and he put up a 0 in the 8th inning on Friday. And it was a great job by Brandon Hyde to ease him in. Listen, Coulomb, you would like in the playoffs to be a high leverage reliever. When he went down, I am of the opinion that Coulomb was the Orioles' best reliever this season in early June when he got hurt. So you want him to be back to that moment, but you don't want to throw him in right there if you don't have to. So you're leading 7-0 in the top of the 8th. Perfect spot to put Coulomb in there to get his feet wet. And there was a little bit of struggles, but he put up the 0. His breaking balls were as nasty as ever. The fastball velocity is still down. That's something I talked about in his 4 rehab outings for Coulomb. He was more 88 to 90 with the 4-seamer and the sinker. Pre-injury, Coulomb was more 90 to 92, so certainly nothing close to a flamethrower from the left side, but that little bit of velocity can always make the difference. So we'll see how it plays out with him more in the high 80s than the low 90s, but the stuff was still good. He went back out there on Sunday and 2/3 of an inning scoreless, looking pretty good in his second outing back. So that is just huge for this Orioles bullpen. We want to see him first in a little higher leverage. Sunday was certainly higher leverage. The O's were down 1 when he came in late in the game, trying to keep it there, and he did. But you'd like to see him try to hold a small lead late in the game before you put him in that spot in the postseason. But I liked what I saw from him. The O's need another lefty. You know, Perez has been good, but shaky at times. Soto's getting better, but still not super trustworthy. To be fair, Keegan Aiken got some huge outs in 2 separate appearances for the Orioles this weekend. So really all of their lefties are actually pitching better. And so to add Coulomb to that mix and know that he's the best of the 4 makes you feel really good about the O's pen as they head towards October and they lock it down for a 7-1 victory on Friday. So then it was time to win the series on Saturday. And the O's came so close with a 9th inning comeback. It was right there. And they just couldn't get it done as the Tigers won in 10. I'll tell you why it happened with the Saturday O's loss coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.yeah. The right stay can make you a fan of any city, even your baseball rivals. And listen, you might want to know a little bit more about those cities, even though you might not want to admit it. Booking.com has hotels, bed and breakfast, vacation rentals, resorts, and so much more. You might want to just find your perfect stay, even in your baseball rival city during the postseason. Now, we are hoping the Orioles can do well enough to get that number 4 seed and host that wild card series. But if they don't, they still should be in the postseason. But if they're the 5 or the 6, they might have to go on the road. They could be in Kansas City. They could be in Detroit, maybe even, probably not, but maybe even in Minnesota. If they're in Kansas City or Detroit, you're going to want to look for some hotels. You're going to want to find them on Booking.com. No matter what team you're rooting for, Booking.com can make you a fan of any U.S. city when you head there. So the right stay, it can make you a fan of any U.S. city, even your baseball rivals. That's at Booking.com. Booking.yeah. And this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by FanDuel. Now, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. That's America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You can do it every NFL Sunday. They keep coming up. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. And you can do it all at FanDuel.com. So the Orioles got that huge win, pretty complete, dominant performance on Friday night. Looked to follow it up on Saturday, but couldn't quite do it. Final score in Game 2, Tigers 6 and the O's 4 in 10 innings. And let's start with what went right from Saturday. And that was the Orioles' offensive ability to rally, because we haven't seen a lot of this lately. It was cool to see it Thursday with the Santander walk-off in the 9th against the Giants. And then they got down in this game 2-0 in the second inning, but just started to creep back almost immediately. Emmanuel Rivera came up with the bases loaded and 1 out in the bottom of the second, delivered a sac fly to make it a 2-1 game. Heck, Rivera had a great day. Also an RBI single with 2 outs and 2 on in the 6th, tied the game at 2. He continues to produce with the Orioles. Also had a big hit in the 9th in their rally there. And that's where it was really impressive. Orioles down 4-2 heading to the bottom of the ninth inning. The closer, Jason Foley for the Tigers, coming in, he had allowed 0 earned runs in 21 of his previous 22 appearances out of the Detroit bullpen when he was coming in on Friday. And the Orioles, or on Saturday, excuse me, the Orioles just did not care. Heston Kjerstad starts with a single. How about Heston Kjerstad? First career 3-hit game on Saturday. He goes 3 for 4 with 3 singles and a hit by pitch in that one. He's been great since returning. Another healthy body the Orioles have gotten back into this lineup. That was awesome to see. Then Emmanuel Rivera had another big hit to make it first and second. Jackson Holliday works a very impressive walk where he took some pitches that were not very far away from being strikes, and he loads the bases with no outs and flips the order up to Gunnar Henderson. Henderson gets a sinker in the middle of the plate. He rocks it into right center field. 2-run double. Game's tied at 4. Orioles have second and third no outs with the middle of the lineup up. And even though it's Foley out there, one of the best Tiger pitchers, you're thinking, all right, at the very least, the Orioles will find a way to scratch across this run, walk it off, and win this series. And that is what it looked like right there. I mean, just patient, good swings, great at-bats. Unfortunately, even with all of that, somehow, some way, the O's couldn't get that 5th run across in the 9th. And that's what went wrong. That was the ability to get that final big hit. And the Orioles, it wasn't a bad thing all day long. I mentioned the Rivera hit, the sac fly, the hit from Gunnar in the 9th inning. Like, they came through in some of those spots, which was absolutely good to see. They were 3 for 6 with runners in scoring position when Cedric Mullins stepped to the plate, second and third, no outs, 4-4 game, bottom 9. That 3 for 6, you're taking that every single day. And even, one of those hits didn't result in a run because in the 4th inning, O's had first and second with 2 outs, and Heston Kjerstad hits a ball to left field, and Adley Rutschman gets sent home. I thought it was a great send by Tony Mansolino. Riley Green has an average arm at best in left field for the Tigers. You forced him to make a perfect throw. Guess what? Green made a perfect throw. They nabbed Adley at the plate to keep the Tigers up 2-1, but I thought that send was fine. So even then, you don't get the run, but you're getting big hits in those spots. Tigers go to the pen. Bo Brisky comes in to replace Foley to find his way out of that jam because he just has much better strikeout stuff than Foley does, and you can't have a pitch to contact guy in there when you're trying to keep that game tied. Unfortunately, Mullins grounds one right to the second baseman, Zach McKinstry. Now, the Orioles usually use the contact play a lot, which is you have a runner on third, less than 2 outs, the infield's in, you're just going on contact. And especially with Holliday, who has some of the best speed on this Orioles team, you would think that would be a contact play guy, but it was not on. It was a 2-hopper right to McKinstry. He looked Holliday back through to first for the first out. Now, I know a lot of Orioles fans don't like the contact play. I think it's because they just get annoyed when outs happen at home plate. I am a huge fan of running the contact play. Force that defense, especially when you have speed on third, which the Orioles did in Jackson Holliday. Force that defense to make a perfect play. And McKinstry got to that ball quickly. If he makes a good throw home, he probably would have gotten Holliday out at the plate for the first out. But you still would have gotten Gunnar to third with one away. You still would have had Mullins at first. He could have absolutely, he would have been able to take second with no throw on defensive indifference. So you still would have had eventually second and third with 1 out, but you caused a little more chaos potentially, and see if maybe you can get an errant throw or Holliday can beat it or you get a blocking the plate or whatever may happen. I'm in favor of those aggressive sends. That's why I was totally fine with Mansolino sending Adley earlier in that game, and I would have been fine with the contact play on. Now they didn't do it. And then Santander came up, and I get it. Santander, extreme fly ball hitter. You're like, hey, any fly ball, it's going to score Holliday on a sac fly, and we're going to win this game. Unfortunately, instead of a fly ball, he hits a pop-up. Now, this thing looked like it might have fallen in shallow left field, but Trey Sweeney, the Tigers rookie shortstop, makes an insane diving catch, colliding with left fielder Riley Green, and somehow holding on to the ball. Now, there was also some people upset with this play, thinking Holliday should have been tagging at third base and should have taken off as soon as Sweeney caught the ball. But in reality, Holliday and third base coach Tony Mansolino, they made the right baseball play right there. And I think a lot of baseball people would back me up on that. You get that little looper into the outfield, you got to be, 10 or 15 feet down the third base line because it's so shallow where okay, if this ball falls in, I need to be close enough to home where I can scamper home and score if they pick it up on one bounce and fire to the plate. On the flip side, the ball is so shallow that even though it was a weird tumbling catch where the players ended up on the ground, you're so close to home plate that it's going to be almost impossible to score even if you are right on the bag tagging up. And you saw it from Sweeney. He caught it, tumbled down, immediately turned to his backside and threw the ball to the cutoff man, honestly, incredibly quickly. If Holiday had tagged up and gone, I think he would have been dead meat at the plate. And you might be saying, Connor, well, isn't that very similar to the contact play you just talked about? And didn't you want Holiday to force the issue there? Yes. But remember, if you do that and run into it out, you've made it 2 outs. Or excuse me, you've made the 3rd out and you have given yourself no more chance to score in the inning versus the other play. If you run into that out, it's still 1 out with the tying run 90 feet away. Those are 2 very different spots to be super aggressive in a tie game in the bottom of the 9th. Even with Holiday's speed, he's going to be out with how quickly Sweeney got that ball in. You need to make sure you're off the bag enough where you can score if that ball drops in. And it's a ball that should have dropped in. That was an incredible play. Felt like it should have won the game. But again, it wasn't a very good swing, or at least result, by Anthony Santander. And then Colton Cowser had the best swing of the 3 of them. He drove the ball to center, unfortunately, right at Parker Meadows. He caught it, and that was the 3rd out. If Santander or Mullins had done that, game over, you walk it off. O's just couldn't get that big swing. It stinks. And they had another chance in the bottom of the 10th. They had 1st and 3rd with 1 out. Unfortunately, they were down 6-4, 2 runs at that point. And Heston Kjerstad just kept swinging at changeups under the zone. He struck out. Then how about Daniel Johnson, who was called up to just provide a little bit of depth for the day on Saturday? With all the changes the O's made to make that comeback, it was Daniel Johnson who got that final at bat. And if you're wondering, why did they not pinch hit for Daniel Johnson? Well, the 2 guys left on the bench were James McCann and Austin Slater, who could have hit for Johnson in that spot against the right-hander. To be completely honest, I know McCann hit 2 homers. I'm not pinch hitting him against a righty. And Slater, while he's been good against lefties, has been a little bit of a slump recently, and I don't think the O's really want him hitting against righties. So the lefty Johnson up there, he's also had a fantastic year offensively in AAA. So I wasn't really completely opposed, to be honest, with Johnson hitting in that spot. Unfortunately, he grounds out on the first pitch, and the O's for 3 for 6 to start the game, finish 0 for 6 with runners in scoring position, and just can't get that final run home, can't get that final big hit that really would have put this thing over the top and would have put them on the brink of clinching a playoff spot at that point. And the shout out for Saturday, well, the shout out goes to the horde of Orioles pitchers who kept them in this game. Cade Povich started this one for the O's and showed some more good strikeout stuff against the Tigers. He struck out 8 in 5 innings of 2-run ball when he faced Detroit last Sunday. Got them again on Saturday, and similar to Burnes, it was a very similar start against this same team the next time out. 5 innings, 2 runs, 2 hits, 7 Ks, and 3 walks on 89 pitches for the Orioles rookie left-hander. And he was getting a lot of use out of that fastball, and they were swinging and missing a lot, especially up in the zone. It was playing well at 92 and 93 and up to 94 at times from Povich. He had a 60% in-zone rate for all of his pitches, which is really, really great for Povich. Just a couple of bad pitches. The Tigers couldn't catch up with the fastball. The sweeper was pretty nasty. Had 5 whiffs on 9 swings there. Just made a bad pitch to Dylan Dingler, a guy who's really been struggling, rookie catcher. You got 2 on with 2 out in the second. You get him 1 and 2. He's behind the high fastball, swinging and missing, fouling it off. And you try to throw a changeup down and away, which wouldn't be a bad pitch if you threw it, strike to ball and it dove out of the zone. Instead, he just hung it too far over the plate, and Dingler hits it into right center for a 2-run triple. Ended up being one of the biggest hits of the game for the Tigers. But other than that, he settled down and he pitched well. Just thought he should have gone maybe high fastball again in that spot, but otherwise just showing good enough stuff to keep the O's in games. And that's what they're kind of asking from Cade Povich right now. And then 7 relievers came in this game to combine to get them through it. Matt Bowman and Keegan Aiken both got out of big jams in the 6th and 7th to keep the game right where it was at 2-2. That was impressive. Unfortunately, Cionel Perez was charged with 2 runs in the top of the 8th when the Tigers took a 4-2 lead. Kind of a bad break for Perez. A couple of ground ball singles, 1 an infield hit. Then that ball hit to Holiday that ended up being the RBI single. Yeah, he got shielded by the umpire, looked like a bit, but that's a play you got to at least knock down. Find a way to get 1 out. If you scoop it, you get a double play, and that inning completely changes. The run does not score. And that's one of those plays where, again, it's a tough play. Ball was hit hard. You're shielded by the umpire. You got to move to your right and then backhand a ball up the middle. But this game was razor thin on the margins of who's going to win. And it came down to really which rookie middle infielder could make the big play. And Trey Sweeney did with that crazy diving catch in the 9th. And Jackson just did not on that play in the 8th. And it's a play he'll make, or hopefully the umpire will get out of his way and he'll make later in his career. But just kind of a tough break for him and a tough break for Cionel Perez. Now, Sir Anthony Dominguez, Gregory Soto, and Brian Baker combined to keep it close and keep it a 4-2 game after that. Unfortunately, Yennier Cano was just a little too hittable in the 10th inning, and he ended up giving up 2 runs. But I thought Brandon Hyde kind of managed this close to a playoff game. Not exactly what he would do in a postseason game, but just continuing to match up as much as he can using most of his bullpen. And hey, if one guy comes through in the ninth, if Mullins, Santander, or Cowser do anything but what they did in the bottom of the ninth inning, it works and the O's win. They did everything to get there, just needed one guy to come through. And unfortunately, that did not happen. So the series was tied, but the O's still had a chance to clinch a playoff berth on Sunday. And now we have note that had they won, it would have happened, because just as I'm recording, a Marcus Semien walk-off single, and the Rangers have beaten the Mariners 6-5 on Sunday, which means, for one, the Mariners in any way cannot catch the Orioles down the stretch, which is very good. That is very, very good. One less team to worry about. But also what it means is, had the O's won Sunday, they would have just now clinched a postseason spot. Unfortunately, it was another close loss to the Tigers. I'll tell you how it happened to finish off the pod coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by Prize Picks. It's America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active users. How do you play Prize Picks? Well, after you download the app, all you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and then you just sit there and you watch the winnings roll in. Now, as long as you're getting those correct picks, you need 4 correct picks to get some money on Prize Picks. But here's the good thing. All through September, and that's going to include next Sunday, that's in September, Prize Picks is offering you 1 Caleb Williams passing yard gets you 1 win. Every week in September, that's a free W. Get to Prize Picks and don't pass that up. It's the best way to get action on sports in many states, and you can win up to 100 times your money. So just download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONMLB on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It is guaranteed. And that is at Prize Picks. Run your game. And this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by the DK Law Group. When you need a law firm, do you want the legal runaround, or would you rather have a no-nonsense approach? Well, you get the latter with the DK Law Group, a Maryland-based law firm who is redefining the legal process with their modern approach. The DK Law Group specializes in real estate law, estate planning, business law, and family law. They're tech savvy, they treat clients like family, and they focus on keeping your legal solutions simple. And one of the things you'll quickly notice with the DK Law Group is their transparent pricing. They believe in clarity and cost, and no one needs to be left in limbo. So contact the DK Law Group today at dklawmd.com. And Locked On Orioles listeners can call today to schedule a free 30-minute consultation when you mention the tagline, Empowering Legacies. So the O's won it on Friday, lost it in extras on Saturday, and unfortunately lost again by a score of 4-3 on Sunday, and missed their chance because, again, as I just mentioned, the Rangers just walked it off against the Mariners. The clinching scenario was O's win, Mariners lose, and they're in the postseason Sunday. One half of it happened. Shout out to the Rangers. M's were up 5-0 in the 6th in that game. Rangers scored 6 unanswered to win it. But on the other side, the O's needed to win, and they just were not able to do it. But let's start with what went right on Sunday. Well, what went right is the Orioles are getting even healthier. They got Jacob Webb back last week. I mentioned they got Danny Coulombe back on Friday, who also pitched a scoreless 2/3 of an inning on Sunday. And then Sunday was really the big one. Jordan Westburg and Ramon Arias, 2 key infielders, both activated off the 15-day injured list before Sunday's game. Westburg had been out since August 1st, basically, with a broken hand. He was hit by a pitch against the Blue Jays. And Arias had been out since September 1st with a sprained ankle he sustained in Colorado. And Westburg had been a huge part of the lineup all year. Arias was red hot, was kind of carrying the Orioles offense at that point, if you remember back to then, before he got hurt. They both come back. They're both in the lineup. Westburg at second base hitting second. Arias at third base hitting eighth. It just, hey, they looked good in their rehab appearances. Couple of games in Norfolk this week. They seem healthy. Throw them back in there. We need a spark. And they gave him some. Jordan Westburg made some great plays at second, had a huge game-tying RBI double in the 5th to knock the game up at 3 in that big Orioles rally. And it was Ramon Urias who started that rally. A 1-out single into center field started that 3-run fifth for the O's on Sunday that eventually tied the game against the Tigers. He played third base well as well. And you just love to have these two guys back in the lineup. It makes this O's team so much stronger. Now, the moves we expected were the ones that happened. Livan Soto and Daniel Johnson both were optioned back to AAA to make room for Westburg and Urias on the roster. And we'll see Jordan Westburg in there every day, whether he's playing second or third base. He's going to be in the lineup every single day. Urias is going to more split time with Jackson Holliday and maybe a little bit with Emmanuel Rivera as well if he sticks around on the roster with how well he's been hitting for the O's since they acquired him basically because of the Westburg and then Urias injuries. But this is huge for them coming back now because they still have a week to get right before the playoffs. And Westburg's going to play every day. Even if Urias doesn't, he's going to have time to get his feet wet, get them back under him before it actually gets to next week, more than likely with the Orioles in that wild card series. And when it really comes down to the big moments, they're going to have a chance to ease their way in a little bit. The only two guys left are Ryan Mountcastle, who is on a rehab stint right now in AAA Norfolk. Actually, in his first AB on rehab this weekend in AAA, had his hardest hit ball in the second half of the season. That's good to see. The wrist is healing. Grayson Rodriguez also still out there. We're not hearing as much about him. Hopefully they can get him back, but it's seeming less and less likely, but there still is a chance there. Now, what went wrong for the Orioles on Sunday? Well, that was Albert Suarez allowing home runs. And his start wasn't terrible. It was 5 innings, 4 runs, 5 hits, 6 Ks, and 1 walk on 80 pitches. But the 3 long balls, despite all of them being solo shots, were the ones that ultimately set him down in this game. Spencer Torkelson got a cutter down the middle in the second, lifted it down the left field line for a homer to make it 1-0. Kerry Carpenter got one on the flag court in the third to make it 2-0. And then Carpenter got him again with a leadoff solo homer just over the grounds crew space in right center field in the sixth. Right when the O's had tied it at 3, Carpenter, next batter immediately top 6, makes it a 4-3 Tigers lead. It ends up being the difference. But the reason why it's so surprising, and that was really most of what Suarez gave up in this game. I mean, you give up 3 home runs of your 5 hits, and it just leads to 4 runs. 5 hits you'll take over 5 innings of work usually. The issue is this has not been something that has really plagued Suarez for most of the year. Through his first 25 appearances of the season, which included 17 starts, he had a 5.3% home run to fly ball rate. What that means basically is 5.3% of the fly balls he allowed went over the fence for a home run. That was through August 18th, his first 25 appearances. Among major league pitchers with at least 80 innings in the big leagues through that date of August 18th, the 5.3 home run to fly ball rate was the lowest in Major League Baseball. Now, some of that is because Suarez lives and dies with the high fastball with good ride, which is a harder and harder ball sometimes to hit out of the ballpark. He gets a lot of pop-ups like that. But some of it is just luck because he is more of a fly ball pitcher. So there's more ground balls than maybe the average, more fly balls than the average guy induces in any game. And a lot of that is luck. It was only 6 home runs allowed in 96 1/3 innings to start the year through his first 25 big league appearances. Now it is flipped. Suarez has a 5+ ERA in his last 6 starts. And that is purely because of the home run ball. Remember, 6 homers in 96 innings to start the year. Over his last 6 starts, which have covered 31 1/3 innings, he's allowed 9 home runs in that stretch. So a third of the time in terms of innings, and the home runs have gone up by 50%. That is a little bit concerning. Now, his fly ball rate in general has only gone up about 5% in that stretch. So he's only allowing a little bit more fly balls in total, which could be one thing leading to more homers, just giving up more fly balls. Yeah, it's that a little bit, but that's not a lot of it. Some of it is certainly some command issues. I mean, we saw what happened on Sunday, change up down the middle to Carpenter, cutter down the middle to Torkelson. I mean, you're leaving off-speed pitches, none of them which are as good as his fastball, in the middle of the plate. Good hitters, and the Tigers, who are red hot right now and are hitting everything over the middle of the plate for the past 2 months, they're going to turn into homers. But also, I mean, this is a 20% home run to fly ball rate in this final 6 starts, whereas it was 5% the first 25 appearances. Since August 19th, that starts this 6-start stretch, The 20% rate is the 5th highest among big league pitchers with 30 or more innings thrown in that stretch. So he's basically gone from the bottom of the list to right near the top of the list in terms of allowing home runs. And it's not that, Connor is just giving up way more hard hit balls. No. Comparing those two stretches recently, his hard hit percentage is basically the same. It's actually down 1% from the earlier stretch. So it's not that he's being hit harder. It's just that, again, a little bit of non-fastballs over the middle of the plate, but he's also just regressing to the mean. And this is what happens for a guy who, although I don't know if he's getting tired. Remember, he pitched about this many innings, in Korea the last 2 years. So he's used to this many innings on the mound, just maybe not in the major leagues. So he's not facing as good a competition late in the year. That could be a little bit of it. He was getting tired anyway in Korea, but he wasn't facing as good of hitters. So now they're making him pay more. That could be certainly some of it. But also it's just regressing to the mean. When you're a fly ball pitcher and only 5% of your fly balls are becoming homers, that's not sustainable. And now it's flipping to the other direction where it's not going to be 20% for a while, but it's coming back to the mean for Albert Suarez. Hopefully that can flip back, but that's a little concerning because you kind of are on eggshells with him, knowing that you were pretty confident he was never going to give up a home run early in the year. Now you're a little worried that a lot of home runs are happening when they hit the ball in the air. Now, his fastball was fantastic on Sunday, 15 whiffs on that pitch. He threw it 64% of the time. He realized early he didn't have great command of his other pitches, so he threw more fastballs, which was good. He retired 8 in a row before the Kerry Carpenter home run to give the Tigers the lead in the 6th. But he had just one whiff combined on the changeup, cutter, and curveball. So the question is, all right, what does Suarez do moving forward? Because it's quite possible he's going to have to start a playoff game and maybe more for the O's behind Corbin Burnes and Zach Eflin. He is certainly in the running for that number 3 starter in the postseason, especially if Grayson Rodriguez is not going to be back. Well, he needs to keep commanding the fastball at the top of the zone like he did Sunday. That pitch was really good. I mean, the Carpenter home run on a high fastball, that was just an amazing swing. But Suarez was commanding it great, getting a lot of swings and misses up there. He can throw 60 to 75% fastballs. I mean, he did 64% on Sunday. He could throw it more if he wanted to. But you still, at the very least, between the cutter, changeup, and curveball, got to have the feel for at least one of those pitches every start. It doesn't have to be the same one every start, but you got to have at least one of them. And he didn't have it Sunday. I think the best bet is the cutter. It's just been the pitch he's thrown the second most, and it's been his best swing and miss pitch throughout the season, especially when at times when he hasn't had his fastball. So maybe it can be that good movement cutter. But he's got to find another pitch, or he could be a little bit of a ticking time bomb down the stretch with the home run ball, which is kind of a concerning 180 for Albert Suarez. Now, the shout out for this game on Sunday, the shout out, I got to give it to the Tigers defense. It's not an Orioles thing, but I got to give it to the Tigers defense. I mean, I mentioned what the O's did. They were down 3-0 in this game. They sparked the comeback. Cedric Mullins hits the 2-run homer. Westburg with the RBI double. It's a 3-3 game with 2 outs in the bottom of the 5th. And Colton Cowser comes up and he hits a ball that's sailing over the fence in right center field. It would be a 2-run homer to give the O's a huge 5-3 lead. And here comes Parker Meadows out of nowhere, leaping over the fence in right center, robbing the homer to end the inning. Just a play that completely changed the game. O's may have won the game had that ball gotten out. Ramon Urias scorches the ball up the middle in the 6th with 2 on and 1 out. Hits off the pitcher, deflects right to the third baseman, Jace Young, who makes an incredible barehanded play to throw him out. Then you have that play in the 4th where Adley hits a liner off Jace Young's glove at third. It bounces into shallow left field. Cowser tries to go first to third, and Ty Madden, the pitcher, does a fantastic job covering third base. Young gets to it, makes a perfect throw to third, and nabs Cowser for the second out. I mean, the Tigers right now, and this is one of the reasons why they find themselves currently in a playoff spot from how far back they were at one point. And the big reason is they're making every play. They're not missing bad pitches in the middle of the zone, and they are making every play defensively. This was a good series. You had one dominant performance, that was the O's on Friday, and 2 games that could have been decided by a coin flip. Could have gone either way. The Tigers got them with a little bit of luck and just making the big plays to squeak out those wins. And especially with how the Royals, who lost again 2-0 to the Giants on Sunday, the Twins, who lost game 1 of the doubleheader to the Red Sox again on Sunday, both of those teams were holding playoff spots. Both of them are struggling mightily. The Tigers also finished with 3 games against the White Sox. This Tigers team, as long as they don't do a complete 180, they're going to make the playoffs. I know there's still some worry around the Orioles, and the Tigers are still only a half game up on a spot, but it kind of feels like right now it's going to be Orioles and Tigers in the postseason, and then it's just whoever figures it out between the Mariners, Royals, and Twins is going to get that final wild card spot in the American League. That's kind of just what it feels like right now. But That'll do it for today's episode. First, do want to give you kind of the final update on what's going on, but we'll get to it much, much more on Tuesday's episode. Again, Red Sox beat the Twins 8-1 in game one of a doubleheader. If my math is correct, correct. I put correct and right in the same word. Red Sox and Twins are about to have first pitch here, about 5:30 Sunday for game two of their doubleheader. If the Red Sox beat the Twins again, I believe the Orioles' magic number now flips to the Twins because the Twins would be below the Tigers. I believe the magic number flips to 1 in terms of the Twins going into play on Monday. That would be huge. Other scores, I mentioned the Mariners lost. That's good. That means the Mariners officially cannot catch the Orioles. That is nice to see. The Royals lost 2-0. They've lost 7 in a row, so they remain 4 games back of the O's. They could still catch the O's, but that's becoming less and less likely as well. And then the other score is, unfortunately, the A's just could not help out the Orioles this weekend. Already lost the first 2 to the Yankees, and right now it is Yankees up 4-2 in the 5th against Oakland. If the Yankees finish that one off, they will be 5 games up on the Orioles heading into this 3-game set in New York this week, which we thought was going to be for the division. Now it's just 1 win by the Yankees, and they clinch the AL East. So that is unfortunate, but we've got our attention turned to those wild card spots at this point. And that's what we're going to talk about on tomorrow's episode. O's, along with basically every other team in baseball, have the day off on Monday before they finish the year with their final road trip at Yankee Stadium and then in Minnesota. We're going to talk about this playoff push on tomorrow's episode. We'll take a look at what all the clinching scenarios are, because the O's could clinch on Tuesday at Yankee Stadium. We'll talk about if they're still alive for the division. Technically they are, but what they would have to do. But more specifically, okay, what needs to happen to wrap up this playoff spot and then specifically wrap up the top wildcard spot to get that home series. We'll also talk about what the playoff roster could look like, because now with Jordan Westburg and Ramon Urias back, that gives them 2 spots. What happens if Ryan Mountcastle comes back and Grayson Rodriguez comes back? That makes for some interesting decisions, including you might have to choose between Emmanuel Rivera and Eloy Jimenez, or you might have to leave both of them off the roster. Might even have to DFA one of those guys. We'll talk about that decision for the O's and hopefully get you any Grayson Rodriguez updates that we have as well. But that's all coming up on tomorrow's episode. Until then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.